June 28, 1914. Sarajevo, Bosnia. Morning bells echo through narrow streets, still damp from an early summer rain. Flags hang from windows. Brass buttons gleam in the sun. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, sits rigidly in the open-top Graf and stiffed automobile. Beside his wife Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg. The engine rattles beneath them as the motorcade moves slowly along the Appell Quay, hugging the Miljacka River. You can hear the crowd before you see it. Cheers mixed with murmurs, a nervous energy thick in the air. This is hostile ground. Bosnia has been annexed by Austria-Hungary only 6 years earlier. Nationalist resentment simmers beneath every smile. Ferdinand knows it. His jaw is tight. He wears his blue general's uniform despite the heat, medals pinned neatly to his chest. Sophie leans toward him, speaking softly. He nods, distracted. Lining the route are young men pretending to be spectators. In their pockets, pistols, bombs, cyanide capsules. Members of a shadowy network tied to young Bosnia, supported by elements within the Serbian Black Hand. Their mission is simple. Kill the Archduke. Shake an empire. The first attempt comes suddenly. At 10:10 a.m., Nedeljko Shabrinović steps forward and throws a bomb. It strikes the folded roof of the Archduke's car, bounces off, and detonates beneath the vehicle behind them. The explosion rips through the street. Shrapnel screams, horses rear, soldiers shout. Ferdinand's driver floors the accelerator. The Archduke is unharmed, but blood streaks the uniforms of his escort. Sophie turns pale. At City Hall, Ferdinand explodes in fury. "So, this is how you welcome your guests," he snaps at the mayor, his voice echoing off stone walls. Still, against advice, he insists on continuing the visit. He wants to see the wounded officers at the hospital. That decision seals history. The route is changed, quietly, but the driver is never properly informed. As the motorcade pulls away, the car slows, then turns onto the original street by mistake. Standing only a few feet away is Gavrilo Princip, 19 years old, thin, sickly, and stunned by his own luck. Moments earlier, he believed the mission had failed. Now the Archduke's car stalls directly in front of him. Princip raises his Browning pistol. 2 shots. One bullet tears into Franz Ferdinand's neck. The other pierces Sophie's abdomen. She collapses against him. "Don't die, darling. Live for our children," Ferdinand whispers, blood filling his mouth. Within minutes, both are dead. By noon, Sarajevo is under martial law. Crowds smash Serbian shops. Arrests follow. Telegrams fly across Europe. In Vienna, Emperor Franz Joseph receives the news with weary resignation. He has buried a son, a brother, and now his heir. But grief quickly gives way to calculation. In Berlin, Kaiser Wilhelm II slams his fist on a desk. He promises Austria-Hungary full support. The blank check. In Belgrade, Serbian officials deny involvement, even as panic spreads through the government. At first, the world does not grasp what has happened. Newspapers report an assassination. Empires have survived assassinations before. But behind closed doors, generals begin opening war plans locked away for years. Railway timetables are reviewed. Mobilization orders are dusted off. Ink dries on documents that cannot be undone once signed. This is not just revenge. This is opportunity. Austria-Hungary sees a chance to crush Serbian nationalism. Germany sees a moment to break the balance of power before Russia fully modernizes its army. Russia sees its role as protector of the Slavic world. France sees a chance to reclaim Alsace-Lorraine. Britain watches uneasily, bound by treaty and fear of German dominance. The machinery of war, slow, complex, and relentless, has begun to turn, and it will not stop. For the next 37 days, Europe hurtles forward, driven not by a single madman or a single bullet, but by pride, fear, alliances, and men convinced the war will be short. No one yet hears the trenches being dug. No one smells the gas. No one counts the millions who will die. But on that quiet Sarajevo street, as the Archduke's blood darkens the pavement, the fuse has been lit.
July 5th, 1914. Berlin, German Empire. The summer heat presses down on the new palace in Potsdam. Inside, maps lie unrolled across polished tables. Red and blue pins mark borders that have not yet bled. Kaiser Wilhelm II paces the room, spurs clicking against marble. Across from him stands Count Alexander von Hoyos, envoy of Austria-Hungary, his face tight with purpose. He delivers Vienna's request plainly: support against Serbia, whatever action Austria chooses. Wilhelm does not hesitate. He speaks of honor, of alliances, of destiny. He assures Hoyos that Germany will stand beside Austria-Hungary faithfully and loyally, even if war with Russia follows. It is a promise with consequences neither man fully calculates. When Hoyos leaves, the Kaiser turns to his generals. Helmuth von Moltke the Younger, chief of the German General Staff, listens intently. He has spent years refining deployment schedules that move millions of men by rail in a matter of days. These plans do not bend easily. Once mobilization begins, stopping is nearly impossible. In Vienna, that promise stiffens spines. For weeks, Austria-Hungary delays, waiting for the right moment, ensuring German backing is absolute. The empire's leaders want war, but they want it clean, controlled, justified. On July 23, 1914, the ultimatum is delivered to Belgrade at precisely 6 p.m. Serbian officials are given 48 hours to respond. The demands are brutal. Austria-Hungary insists Serbia suppress all anti-Austrian propaganda, dissolve nationalist organizations, arrest named conspirators, and, most shocking of all, allow Austrian officials to operate inside Serbia to conduct investigations. It is a direct assault on Serbian sovereignty. Inside the Serbian Foreign Ministry, ministers read the document in silence. Some turn pale. Others clench their fists. They know what this means. In St. Petersburg, Russian diplomats read the ultimatum and immediately grasp the danger. Serbia is Russia's protégé, bound by blood, religion, and political necessity. To abandon it would be to surrender influence in the Balkans and prestige at home. Tsar Nicholas II is informed late at night. He rubs his temples, exhausted. Russia is not ready for war. Its army is vast but poorly equipped and unevenly trained. Railways lag behind Germany's. Mobilization could take weeks. Still, he cannot allow Austria-Hungary to humiliate Serbia. In Paris, President Raymond Poincaré is aboard a ship returning from a state visit to Russia. He does not yet know the ultimatum has been delivered. The irony is sharp. Two allies reaffirming unity just as Europe edges toward catastrophe. Back in Belgrade, the Serbian response is drafted carefully, almost desperately. They agree to nearly everything. They accept censorship, arrests, the dismantling of nationalist groups. But on one point, they refuse. Foreign officials conducting operations on Serbian soil is unacceptable. On July 25th, minutes before the deadline expires, the Serbian reply is handed over. In Vienna, it is dismissed within hours. That same evening, Austria-Hungary breaks diplomatic relations with Serbia. Troops begin moving south. Artillery units are quietly repositioned along the Danube. The die is cast. In St. Petersburg, Russia responds not with words, but with orders. On July 29th, Nicholas II authorizes partial mobilization against Austria-Hungary. It is meant as a warning, not a declaration. But generals warn him that partial measures will paralyze the army. Mobilization plans are all or nothing. Messages fly between cousins, Nicholas and Wilhelm, desperate telegrams pleading for restraint. History will remember them as the Willy-Nicky correspondence. Wilhelm urges Russia to stand down. Nicholas insists he cannot abandon Serbia. Both claim they want peace. Both authorize preparations for war. On July 30th, Russia orders full mobilization. In Berlin, the news lands like a thunderclap. German generals crowd around Moltke. Mobilization is no longer theoretical. It is happening across the eastern frontier. Germany's war plans demand speed. Delay is defeat. On August 1st, 1914, Germany declares war on Russia. Church bells ring in Berlin. Crowds gather in the streets cheering. Young men rush to enlist, flowers pressed into their hands. Many believe they will be home by Christmas. But the logic of German planning demands more. France cannot be left to mobilize unchallenged. At 6 p.m., Germany declares war on France. Now the Western gears turn. German troops begin moving through Luxembourg and prepare to violate Belgian neutrality, a small nation whose protection is guaranteed by Britain. In London, the cabinet is split. Some argue Britain can stay out. Others warn that allowing Germany to crush Belgium would leave the English Channel facing a hostile superpower. On August 4th, German troops cross the Belgian border. That night, Britain delivers an ultimatum to Berlin. It expires at midnight. There is no reply.
August 4th, 1914. Liège, Belgium. Before dawn, the sky trembles. German 42-centimeter howitzers, the massive siege guns soldiers nickname Big Bertha, open fire. The ground convulses as shells arc overhead and crash into concrete forts once believed impregnable. Belgian gunners scramble through smoke-filled corridors, deafened, blinded, stunned by the sheer force of the bombardment. Belgium was not supposed to resist. German planners assumed its army would step aside, its government protest politely, and its railways be handed over intact. Instead, the Belgians fight. At Fort Lansin, defenders man their guns until the magazines explode beneath them. Entire crews vanish in an instant. News of the resistance spreads along the German columns, slowing the advance hour by hour. Those hours matter. To the German General Staff, time is everything. The Schlieffen Plan, perfected on paper over a decade, demands speed, so precise it borders on obsession. 7 armies must wheel through Belgium, swing south of Paris, and crush France in 6 weeks before Russia can bring its full weight to bear in the east. Trains run by the minute. Infantry march until their feet bleed. Officers carry pocket watches like sacred objects. There is no room for improvisation. In Paris, the mood is electric. Posters appear overnight. Mobilisation générale. Church bells ring not for celebration, but for duty. Reservists kiss wives goodbye on crowded platforms, stuffing uniforms into battered suitcases. Some smile. Others stare straight ahead, already hollow-eyed. French troops move east toward the frontier, guided by Plan 17, an aggressive doctrine rooted in belief in the offensive spirit, in courage overcoming firepower. Red trousers and blue coats march toward machine guns they do not yet understand. In Alsace and Lorraine, the French attack first. They advance singing. They fall screaming. German MG-08 machine guns scythe down waves of infantry. Artillery tears formations apart. Within days, tens of thousands are dead or wounded. The dream of a glorious advance collapses into mud and blood. But while France bleeds in the east, the real danger grows in the north. German armies pour across Belgium, through Brussels toward Namur, then west. Refugees clog the roads, families pushing carts, livestock dragging behind, children crying as columns of gray-uniformed soldiers march past. Some Belgian towns resist. Others panic.
In reprisal for snipers, real or imagined, German troops execute civilians, burn villages, and leave bodies in the streets. At Dinant and Louvain, entire communities are destroyed. The world will soon read about these atrocities with horror. In London, newspapers fill with images of ruined Belgian towns. Public opinion hardens overnight. This is no longer a distant continental conflict. It is a moral crusade. The British Expeditionary Force, small but professional, lands in France. 6 divisions, well-trained, well-equipped, and vastly outnumbered. Their commander, Field Marshal Sir John French, knows they cannot stop the German tide alone. On August 23rd, near the Meuse-Condé Canal, British troops dig in. They hear it before they see it. The steady tramp of German infantry, the rumble of artillery, the rising roar of battle. When the Germans advance, the British open fire with Lee-Enfield rifles, so fast and accurate that German officers believe they are facing massed machine guns. Entire units falter under the unexpected storm of bullets. But numbers tell. The Germans regroup. Artillery pounds British positions. Flanks buckle. Orders come down the line. Withdraw. The Great Retreat begins. For 2 weeks, British and French forces fall back southward, fighting rearguard actions, blowing bridges, sleeping in ditches. Men collapse from exhaustion. Boots rot from constant marching. The German columns follow relentlessly, confident victory is near. In Berlin, church bells ring again. Maps are updated daily. Arrows point toward Paris. But the timetable begins to slip. Belgian resistance has delayed the advance. Supply lines stretch thin. Soldiers lag behind schedule. Units peel off to secure flanks and suppress pockets of resistance. Communication frays. In St. Petersburg, Russia moves faster than expected. On August 17th, Russian armies surge into East Prussia. German civilians flee in terror. Panic reaches Berlin. 2 German corps are hastily pulled from the western advance and sent east, forces the Schlieffen Plan cannot spare. The decision is small on paper. It will prove decisive. By early September, the German right wing approaches the outskirts of Paris, but not as planned. Instead of swinging wide around the city, exhausted commanders cut inside to maintain contact with neighboring armies. A gap opens. In Paris, military Governor General Joseph Gallieni watches the maps with growing urgency. He sees it. The exposed German flank, the sliver of opportunity. Taxi horns echo through the city street. Thousands of Parisian taxis are commandeered, carrying fresh troops toward the front. It is a small force, but the symbolism is enormous. The capital itself is sending its sons to fight. On September 6, 1914, along the River Marne, French and British forces turn to face their pursuers. After weeks of retreat, they attack. Rifles crack, artillery thunders. Men charge through wheat fields already flattened by shell fire. German officers shout orders that arrive too late. Units fight desperately to hold ground they were never meant to defend. The battle rages for days. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the German advance falters. For the first time since Sarajevo, the unstoppable momentum of war hesitates. Europe holds its breath. September 9th, 1914, the Marne River, northeast of Paris. Rain begins to fall, light at first, then steady, turning roads into slick ribbons of mud. Soldiers stumble forward anyway, boots heavy, rifles slick in their hands. German First Army, commanded by General Alexander von Kluck, is no longer advancing. Orders are confused. Messengers ride hard between headquarters only to find units already shifting position or gone. Telephone lines are cut by shell fire. Maps no longer match reality. The gap between the German First and Second Armies widens. French reconnaissance aircraft, fragile machines of canvas and wire, circle overhead. Pilots lean out of open cockpits, scribbling notes, shouting to observers. What they see confirms Gallieni's fears and hopes alike. The Germans are exposed. At French headquarters, General Joseph Joffre issues the order he has been waiting weeks to give. Advance. The counterattack slams into the German flank with unexpected force. French infantry surge forward, supported by artillery hastily dragged into position. British units, weary but resolute, press in from the north. For German soldiers, the shock is profound. They were told Paris would fall within days. Instead, they are fighting desperately to avoid encirclement. At the tactical level, the battle is chaos. Small unit actions, confused charges, artillery firing blind through smoke and rain. Men lose their officers. Officers lose their maps. Companies merge or vanish altogether. On September 12th, German command makes the unthinkable decision. Retreat. Orders ripple down the line. Pull back to the Aisne River, dig in, hold. For the first time since the war began, the German army is moving backward. In Paris, church bells ring, not in triumph, but in relief. The city has been spared. The war, however, has not been won. Along the Aisne, German troops dig into the earth with frantic urgency. They carve firing steps, reinforce parapets with sandbags, string barbed wire under cover of darkness. French forces attack again. But now the defenders have the advantage. Machine guns chatter, artillery pounds exposed attackers. The ground drinks blood. Within days, both sides begin digging, not as a temporary measure, but as a necessity. What emerges is something new. From the North Sea to the Swiss border, lines of trenches snake across the landscape. Dugouts deepen. Communication trenches branch out like veins. The land is reshaped by shovels and shells. The war of movement is over. In its place comes stalemate. Attempts to outflank the enemy fail repeatedly in what becomes known as the race to the sea. Each side rushes north, digging in again and again until there is nowhere left to turn. By November 1914, Europe is locked in place. In the trenches, soldiers begin to understand what this war truly is. Rats swarm at night, fat from the dead. Water pools at the bottom of trenches, soaking feet until skin peels away. The smell, mud, rot, cordite, never leaves. Shellfire is constant, a distant thunder punctuated by sudden earth-shaking explosions. Across no man's land, the enemy is close, sometimes close enough to hear coughing, sometimes close enough to hear laughter. On Christmas Eve, something extraordinary happens. Along parts of the front, German soldiers begin singing Stille Nacht. British troops answer with carols of their own. Lanterns are raised. Men cautiously climb from trenches unarmed. They meet in the open ground between the lines. Hands are shaken, cigarettes exchanged, names spoken, footballs kicked across frozen mud. For a few brief hours, the war pauses. Officers are furious. Orders come swiftly. This must never happen again. In the east, the situation is no less dire. Russia's early advance into East Prussia ends in disaster at the Battle of Tannenberg. German generals Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff encircle and annihilate the Russian Second Army. Over 90,000 Russian soldiers are captured. The myth of invincibility shatters there as well, but not Germany's. Instead, the war expands. The Ottoman Empire enters the conflict in late 1914, closing the Dardanelles and opening new fronts in the Caucasus and Middle East. Japan joins the Allies, seizing German possessions in the Pacific. Colonial troops from Africa, India, and Asia are drawn into a European war they barely understand. By the end of the year, The casualty lists are already staggering. Hundreds of thousands dead, millions wounded. And still, many believe the war can be decided next year. One more offensive, one breakthrough. They do not yet understand that the machinery unleashed in those 37 days cannot be switched off. Diplomacy has failed. Timetables rule. Industry now feeds the front with shells, guns, and men at a scale never seen before. The shock of war has passed. What remains is endurance, and Europe is only at the beginning. December 1914. The Western Front. Winter settles in quietly, almost mercifully, as if nature itself is exhausted by the violence. Frost hardens the mud, snow dusts the parapets. For a moment, the guns seem to breathe. Then they resume. Inside the trenches, men adapt to a life none of them imagined in August. Dugouts are reinforced with timber. Tin cans become cooking pots. Sandbags become furniture. Survival is now routine, not heroism. Officers still speak of breakthroughs. Soldiers no longer believe them. In London, Berlin, Paris, and Vienna, war ministries study casualty figures that no one dares publish in full. The numbers are already beyond comprehension. Entire battalions raised in summer enthusiasm no longer exist. Yet the logic of the war demands continuation. Generals argue that the enemy must be near collapse. Politicians insist victory is necessary to justify the losses already suffered. Industrialists convert factories to produce shells, rifles, uniforms, anything the front consumes. The war becomes a system. In early 1915, both sides seek a solution to the stalemate. The Germans try poison. On April 22, 1915, near Ypres, a strange green-yellow cloud rolls across no man's land. Canadian and French troops watch in confusion as it drifts toward them, hugging the ground. Then, men begin to scream. Chlorine gas burns lungs, eyes, skin. Soldiers claw at their throats, collapse, choking, drown on dry land. Entire sections of the line disintegrate. A gap opens, 5 miles wide. But German commanders hesitate. They had not expected success. Reserves are unprepared. The moment passes. Gas becomes another horror without ending the war. The Allies respond in kind. Masks are issued. New gases are developed. The front adapts again. In the east, movement still exists, but at terrible cost. Russian armies clash repeatedly with German and Austro-Hungarian forces across vast distances. Poor equipment and shortages plague the Russians. Rifles are shared. Artillery shells are rationed. Soldiers charge positions unarmed, told to pick up weapons from the fallen. By 1915, Russian losses number in the millions. The consequences reach far beyond the battlefield. Food shortages grip cities. Strikes erupt. Confidence in the Tsar begins to erode. The war that was meant to unite the empire is slowly hollowing it out. In the south, the Balkans ignite again. Italy, lured by promises of territory, abandons its former allies and enters the war on the Allied side. Along the Isonzo River, Italian and Austro-Hungarian troops smash into each other again and again, gaining yards at the cost of thousands. Mountains become killing grounds. Avalanches bury entire units. Men freeze at their posts. War climbs where it was never meant to go. Still, leaders insist the end is near. In 1916, that illusion finally shatters. At Verdun, German commanders launch an offensive designed not to break through, but to bleed France dry. They shall bleed to death, declares General Erich von Falkenhayn. Verdun becomes a furnace. Shells fall day and night. Hills change hands dozens of times. Men fight for names on a map. Hill 304, Mortome. Places stripped of meaning except survival. The French refuse to yield. They shall not pass. They do not. At the Somme, the British attempt their own solution. Artillery fires for a week. Commanders promise the wire will be cut, the enemy crushed. On July 1st, 1916, whistles blow. Men climb ladders and walk into machine gun fire. By nightfall, nearly 60,000 British casualties litter the fields. And still the war goes on. By now, the truth is impossible to ignore. This is not a war of months. It is a war of exhaustion, of nations, economies, and entire societies. The speed that shocked the world in 1914 has given way to something far worse. A war that cannot end quickly. A war that no one can afford to lose. And a war that will demand even more. More men, more weapons, more sacrifice, before it finally breaks. Early 1917. Europe at war. The front lines have barely moved, but the world behind them is cracking. In Berlin, bread is stretched thin, mixed with sawdust and potato flour. Civilians queue for hours in the cold, ration cards clutched in gloved hands. Children grow pale. The winter of 1916 to 1917 becomes known as the turnip winter, a quiet catastrophe far from the trenches. In Britain, factories roar day and night. Women flood into munitions plants, hands stained yellow by chemicals, hair tied back beneath scarves. Trains loaded with shells thunder toward ports and depots. The war has become total. On the seas, Germany makes a desperate calculation. Its admirals argue that only one weapon can break the stalemate: unrestricted submarine warfare. U-boats will sink everything bound for Britain, neutral or not, starving the island into surrender before American intervention becomes decisive. On February 1st, 1917, Germany unleashes its submarines without restraint. Ships vanish beneath the waves. Sailors drown in freezing water. Neutral flags offer no protection. In Washington, the reports pile up. President Woodrow Wilson, re-elected on the promise of peace, grows grim. The final blow comes weeks later, a message intercepted and decoded by British intelligence. The Zimmermann telegram. Germany offers Mexico an alliance against the United States, promising the return of lost territories if America enters the war. The revelation shocks the American public. On April 6, 1917, the United States declares war on Germany. The conflict that began with a pistol shot in Sarajevo has now drawn in the world's greatest industrial power. Across the Atlantic, American troops are few at first, untrained, inexperienced, but their presence changes everything. German planners understand the clock is now against them. In Russia, the war reaches a breaking point. Food shortages, military failures, and exhaustion ignite unrest in Petrograd. In March 1917, crowds flood the streets. Soldiers refuse orders. The regime collapses almost overnight. Tsar Nicholas II abdicates. The provisional government vows to continue the war, but the army is finished. Discipline evaporates. Desertions soar. By November, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seize power with a single promise: peace. Russia exits the war in March 1918, signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Germany gains vast territory, but at terrible cost to its moral standing and resources. Now, the final act begins. Freed from the Eastern Front, Germany launches one last gamble. In March 1918, stormtroopers pour across the Western Front under cover of fog and artillery. New infiltration tactics punch holes in Allied lines. Paris is shelled once more. For weeks, it seems the gamble might succeed, but Germany has spent its last reserves. American troops arrive by the hundreds of thousands, then by the millions. Fresh, determined, and well supplied. On August 8, 1918, the Allies strike back at Amiens. Tanks roll forward. Aircraft scream overhead. Infantry advance behind creeping barrages. German resistance collapses. General Erich Ludendorff will later call it the Black Day of the German Army. From that moment, retreat becomes permanent. All along the front, German units fall back. Allies advance relentlessly. Morale crumbles. Mutiny spreads in the German Navy. Revolution brews at home. On November 11, 1918, in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, Germany signs the armistice. At 11 a.m., the guns fall silent. The war that exploded into existence in just 37 days has consumed 4 years, reshaped continents, destroyed empires, and killed more than 16 million people. Men step cautiously from trenches, unsure what silence means. Some cheer, some weep. Some simply sit, unable to comprehend that it is over. The world that emerges from the war is unrecognizable from the one that entered it. Borders are redrawn. Old certainties are gone. The seeds of another, even greater conflict are already buried beneath the ruins. What began with speed ends in exhaustion. And the shock that stunned Europe in 1914 will echo for generations.